anagrammatical, even solar activity, to show from numerous improvable possibilities that something very strange, call it supernatural if you like, something very strange was involved in the prophecy of the popes. And it either is supernaturally inspired, or people inside the Vatican believe it was, and therefore have been electing popes for hundreds of years that they feel would fulfill this prophecy of the popes. And what might that indicate, therefore, for the upcoming conclave that's going to happen at any moment, according to news sources, to elect the successor to Pope Pope Benedict XVI, which on the list is Petrus Romanus, who gives rise to the Antichrist and end times prophecy. So if insiders at the Vatican believe it, if they've been selecting popes that they think can fulfill that prophecy, then what are they committed to? And if that's not the case, then the prophecy itself is very mysterious in that it has been very accurate. And what I want to tell people is I'm not just an author, and I'm also a best-selling author, but I'm a publisher. And I got to tell you, the miniature masterpiece in our new book, Petrus Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, that was written by Chris Putnam, that chapter that deals exclusively with the work by René Thibault, it's fresh, it's investigative, it's scholarly, it's well-researched, it's never been published anywhere before, and I guarantee you it's going to stun some readers, the media. It's a game-changer for mythologists and other prophecy writers who are going to be taken, really, offside by it. The 2012 community is old news compared to what Chris has discovered. Yes?
I think we need to bring in David Flynn's work, Temple at the Center of Time, too. Basically, we're talking about Lucifer's end-time play for control of the world.
Well, Steve, before I move to Jerusalem, we were talking about. Okay, I want to go ahead and publish this thing to my site, so people can go and verify this thing with the 11-year reign. I'm going to go ahead and hit publish right now at Logos Apologia. Okay, that should be live on the internet in just a minute. Now, what this will show you is that the calculation with 11 years per pope extrapolated up to now works out perfectly, and in fact, it supports that it could happen in the next 2 or 3 months. Now, we can talk about it more later if you guys want to look at it, but
how do you both figure? Here's a question that I want to hear from both of you. Tom, you and I did a show on the alien disclosure, okay? And I'm not trying to take away and get into UFO or take away from Petrus Romanus, but it's got to be obvious to everybody that a man in the position who's going to assume the final pope, the Black Pope's role, is more than adept at all this stuff.
Well, that's absolutely right. The work by René Thibault is directly connected to what David Flynn wrote about. It's directly connected to what's happening in the Middle East. The bottom line is all of this prophecy is bits and pieces, parts to a puzzle that provide a much bigger picture that says to the Christian community, you better wake up because you are right now entering into a period of time that has been prophesied for thousands of years to unfold. This is part of the reason why both Chris and I, at times during the work on this research, stopped dead in our tracks and almost didn't publish this work because, frankly, it was that unnerving. And I'd love to talk in a moment about David Flynn's work and plans that you and I have, but I don't want to take away from Chris answering the question about what this has to do with the Vatican's designs on Jerusalem and the next temple.
Well, certainly. Steve, it's interesting that you went there because, after kind of establishing that I believe there was something to the prophecy, the first place that I went was to the Jerusalem issue. And, one of the first documents that I found that's something that is going to be revealed probably for the first time for a lot of people in this book is that the site Al Jazeera found a whole bunch of classified U.S. State Department documents that from WikiLeaks and other places, and they put them up on the internet. And I went and dug through a whole cache of documents there. And, I have a conversation that happened in the U.S. State Department between Condoleezza Rice and some representatives from the Palestinians, where they're actually talking about turning over the holy city of Jerusalem to, quote, unquote, religious authorities, non-government people. Okay? Now, where that coincides with a lot of research coming out of Israel is like people like Barry Kamish, and I went and bought like 3 of his books. He's been on this story for the last 15 years or so, where Simon Peres, who's now the president of Israel, promised the old holy city of Jerusalem to the Vatican. This has been going on for quite a while. This conspiracy has been going on that they think that there's going to be some kind of peace deal between the Palestinians and Israel, and they're going to make Jerusalem an international city that's not really the capital of Israel anymore. It's going to be international. It's going to have a Palestinian representative, and it's going to have a Jewish representative. But they're actually talking about putting the Pope in charge of Jerusalem. And, right as we were finishing up the research for the book, there's been a whole slew of articles coming out of Jerusalem where they're giving up the sovereignty of some of the holy sites to the Vatican right now. Just in the last couple weeks, there's a monastery that has supposedly David's grave, and also the Hall of the Last Supper is there. Now, the last articles that I read, it seems to be that they have actually given sovereignty over that landmark to the Vatican already. So it's not if it's going to happen; it's already happening now, as far as I know. And where this is going, I think it's leading to the Third Temple.
Yep.
I really do. And when you start looking at the prophecies in 2 Thessalonians about the Antichrist sitting in the temple declaring himself God, I think that is speaking to a real temple in Jerusalem, and not an allegorical temple. And I think that we're seeing the pieces of that falling into place right now. Don't you think so, Tom?
Well, I think it's almost impossible to, even in a 4-hour interview, to be able to detail for all of the listeners all of the ways in which we are right now seeing a waterfall of biblical fulfillment. I don't want to be crude, but a person would have to be an idiot not to understand that we have entered into a very portentous moment in time. It's stuff that David Flynn wrote about in research to determine who among the cardinals is most papable. Which of the contenders in Rome right now is most likely to take the throne of St. Peter, so-called, following Pope Benedict XVI? Nothing becomes more intriguing than how at the center of all of that is a cover-up involving the third secret of Fatima. This is found in the most likely candidates, I believe, in Petrus Romanus. And I want to make this point as quickly as I can, and then I'm going to move to the alien side. Can I do it that way, Steve?
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, Peter the Roman. Who is that going to be? Well, if you had asked me just 60 days ago, I would have said, without doubt, that Peter the Roman is going to be Cardinal Tarcisio Peter Bertone. He was born in Romano, which means the Roman. His second name is Peter. He was born in Canterbury. He's Peter the Roman. And among other things, Cardinal Bertone is, at the time that our book is heading to the typesetter, it's with the typesetter right now, he's second in command at the Vatican. And he's the Secretary of State. The Pope's Carmelingo also, which is Italian for Chamberlain, which means that he will be responsible during a papal vacancy to serve as the acting head of state of the Vatican City until the time of agreement the election of a new pope. And part of our investigation into Bertoni includes background into a 2007 book that he wrote called The Last Seer of Fatima. And the reason why this is important is because it appears to have accomplished exactly the opposite of its primary objective, and that is mainly to refute another work by a famous Italian media personality, a journalist, an author by the name of Antonio Socchi, whose manuscript, The Fourth Secret of Fatima, claims that Rome, the Holy See, the Vatican, has been suppressing information concerning the true secret that was allegedly delivered to those, kids there in Fatima in 1917. I want people to maybe go to Google and Google this for themselves. I apologize, I'm being interrupted here. In his uncharacteristically explosive response to Cardinal Bertoni, people can Google this title: Dear Cardinal Bertoni, who, between you and me, is deliberately lying? And they will discover how, after significant time and investigation, this Mr. Socchi concluded that the Vatican had withheld an important part of the Fatima revelation during its celebrated press conference in 2000, the release of the message of Fatima. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Well, Socchi describes in the introduction to his book how he used to believe, like most Catholics probably still do, that the Vatican's official version of the Fatima message had been released in 2000. The vision of Fatima was reportedly released in the year 2000. At that time, it had been prepared by who? Cardinal Ratzinger, who is now the current Pope Benedict XVI, and Monsignor Tarcisio Bertone. I have no idea what I'm listening to. Okay, in any case, the release to the public claimed to be the final secret in the year 2000. The investigator from Italy, from Rome, Socchi, he had come across an article by an Italian journalist by the name of Vittore Missori and some other stuff. What their work had caused him to do was to begin to question whether or not, in fact, Rome had released the final secret of Fatima. And what he did was he started a investigative research. Now, keep in mind, this is one of the most renowned media personalities in Rome. He's a Catholic. But he began a probe focusing on the biggest question of them all, and that was a portion of Lucy, the last living young person from Fatima who had received these revelations, had a portion of her document which contained the principal words of the so-called Blessed Virgin Mother concerning end-time conditions at Rome, and even perhaps the coming of Petrus Romanus. Was that being withheld from public view by the Vatican due to its potentially explosive content? And what happened was Socchi's suspicions deepened after he started, requesting interviews with Cardinal Bertoni, who had been an acquaintance of his in the past. In fact, Bertoni had invited him to speak at various conferences before he had his position as Secretary of State. But now, all of a sudden, Bertoni wouldn't answer his inquiries. And what happened was, over a period of time, bottom line is, Socchi was left convinced that there are two sets of the Fatima secret. One that the public has seen, which was published in 2000, but another which, for reasons as yet at least mostly unknown, the Vatican is keeping buried. And at the beginning of that plot was a description of the third secret that was given by Cardinal Angelo Sodano, who is now the power, if you will, in Rome, whose supporters are putting out these poison pen letters to try to undergird, or try to, whatever the word is.
Undermine,
the position of Cardinal Bertone and his possibility of becoming Petrus Romanus.